we'll go off on tangents, and like I said, if there's anything you go, I don't really want to talk about that, Jesse, just let me know and I can cut it out and we'll go from there. But I'm just thrilled to I'm excited about visiting with you. So here we go, counting us down in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and if there is a founding father in the East Street Nation, I am talking to a Benjamin Franklin, a John Hancock, a Thomas Jefferson. I am talking to the great Mike Appel this evening. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for that unbelievable introduction. How will I ever live up to it?
Well, I think you
that's
have.
The question.
Yeah. I just thank you so much. We've already spent a few minutes talking, and you've already shared a lot of your stuff. So I do want to start out with Louise Poynton does an amazing David Cassidy podcast, and she is the one who connected us. You were her guest, and I urge my listeners to go back and find that episode of her podcast, because we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But I thought you were so real and shared so much emotion about your relationship with David Cassidy and those early Partridge records.
Well, what's been so funny. I mean, everything seems to wane over time. My memory, also, things that I've forgotten, that I looked up even recently and stumbled across things that I had long forgotten about. One of the things I've forgotten, and I always assume that the material for the Partridge Family was trite and was, geared to a younger audience, little girls, the blessed little young girls. And I went back and I started listening to the songs. I was absolutely stunned at the level of the musicality and the musicality of them. Not so much the lyrics. The lyrics were what I call serviceable.
Right.
But the music itself was far superior than I had ever given it credit for. Other than, Doesn't Somebody Want to Be Wanted, which I actually dislike the most out of those songs, even though it was the biggest hit.
Okay.
The other songs stand up, Umbrella Man, Rainmaker, can't you hear your heartbeat? I can't hear your heartbeat, etc., etc. Those songs were way better than I thought they were. And when people would run into me and say, "Oh, wow, yeah, the guy with David Cassidy. Oh, I love David Cassidy," I would say to myself, "What about Bruce Springsteen? Did you ever hear him?" I was like, "What?" It was like, so, and then of course I get, you get guys that are what I call real archivists and things like, in matters like this, where they'll bump into me somewhere and they'll say to me, "Oh, I love what you did with Sir Lord Baltimore. What a great act. The first time anybody ever heard the words, heavy metal was because of them."
Yeah.
And, they were the godfathers of Stoner Rock, all which was, news to me.
Yeah.
But as I go back and look over the history and, what happened with their legacy, and then, of course, when I listened to the new recording they did of the first album, when, Universal put it out. They were originally on Mercury, which was a Universal subsidiary. I was very, very, very surprised at how heavy and how raucous and how rough and wild they were, and how incredibly brilliant they were as musicians. I mean, they couldn't write their lyrics to save their lives. They had no idea about concepts. They had no way to, they just were not intellectually like the heavy metal acts from England. But boy, they could cut it with them musically, any one of them. There was nobody who was better than those three guys. I mean, they took me on a trip. Every time I went down to their mother's basement, and I worked with them there, because we rehearsed them like hell, because we had organize all those riffs and all that craziness into some kind of a song format. Not have to be like, Neil Diamond's Song Blue and Sweet Caroline, not quite like that. But, just some things have to be repeated. Some things have to build upon something else.
Sure.
And it has to sound natural, and it has to be new and fresh too. It has to be like, where I can't point to it. In fact, when they first auditioned for me, I thought that some of the songs might have been cops from Jimmy Page.
Oh,
and the lead guitar player was insulted when I asked him about that. These are all my riffs. These are all my riffs. And they were indeed, but they were. They were like, what should I say? I'll give you just one small example of what I mean by being sort of on a level that I never reached as a musician. And guitar player, and I was pretty good back in the day, not bad. Not as good as the people I'm talking about right now. But one day we were doing one of these cuts of Cyril Bolter in the studio, and we kept on hearing a noise. And we kept saying, what the hell is that noise? And I went out into the studio and I said, all right, run the track. And so they ran the track, and then Louis Dambrett starts to play the guitar. And I'm listening, putting my ear to the amplifier. I'm going around the room listening to other amplifiers that might be making noises. Nothing. No, don't know what's going on. I go back inside the control room. I say, listen, I can't find a damn thing. He said, well, look, he says, it's got to be, you hear it, don't you? I said, yes, I do. I said, but I really don't know what to do. Go outside one more time. This is it. And I stand right next to Louis. He goes into the solo, and he rocks his head back, and he starts to go, while he's playing this fantastic solo. That's what he does. I never heard it before in my life on all of his sessions until this one night where he's doing this. And I said, stop everything. I said, Louis is making the song, the sound with his voice, with his vocal. He's just making these guttural tones because of the way he plays and where he finds that, not excitement, but that brilliance, that magic, that musical magic. This is how he gets to that spot, and how he takes it from the other side somehow and comes back to here, and then we can all hear it. I said, that's what he's doing. So we have to put these gobos in front of it and dampen the microphone from the amplifier so we don't pick up Louis singing.
I love that. That is so
that's
great.
How we got around it. But that was special. And only a few times in my life have I reached it myself in my own recordings, where you reach a magical point where you realize, hey, I don't think I did this song in this production by myself. I think that there's some other thing here that's working with me. When I came to the studio tonight, I only sort of knew this much about it. And now I go home with all this. How the hell what happened between how I got to when I got to the studio and when I left to go home? Man, that's an odd coincidence. I mean, I'm not used to having that kind of otherworldly help, for lack of better terminology. And I've had that a number of times in my life. And if there's anything, I'm in it for these days, it's to get back to those moments, to know that I'm in a moment that's not really of this earth. It's from someplace else. And I'm still in the earth realm, but it's somewhere else. And I somehow can bridge it by desire or goodwill or whatever it is. I somehow get there and can do it. And looking to get back into the studio to get some of that going again.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear about that, right? Like Bruce calls it 1 + 1 = 3. There's just something magical about that.
Yep. Oh, and he did it. He hit those spots, especially in Born. Well, he hit him in a number of spots, but even on some of his demos, he hit it, and I was like, Jesus. Well, I mean, the night he came in and did Visitation at Fort Horn, which is, that's not a pop song.
Right.
He comes in and he does Visitation at Fort Horn, and Louis Lahavre, the engineer, and myself are just sitting there in the dark up at Blauvelt Studio. It's just him and his acoustic guitar, and he's imitating the various characters in this fort, visitation at Fort Horn.
Yeah.
And he's imitating the captain and he's talking to the captain. And it's just amazing how he did this stuff. I mean, it's like you don't come to Mike Appel if you don't have like hit songs, and whether he didn't know whether he had hit songs or not by what he was doing, I certainly did. I knew they weren't hit songs, but I was blown right out the door. I said, this is just straight art, Mike. You either gonna carry this guy and see where it takes you, or you have to tell him, hey, listen, you're gonna have to be more, you're gonna have to bridge where you are now to somewhere over here, closer to early Neil Diamond or something like that, Solitary Man, something like that, to be able to have the hits as well as have the art.
I usually ask my guests, and I'm going to get back. I want to hear about you growing up, but this is a perfect segue. I usually ask my guests, when did you first discover Bruce, and what about him spoke to you? And you are you've started that story, so your perception is totally different than us fans. So I'm going to ask you that question, Mike. Obviously you remember when you first discovered him, found that, but did it speak to you right away? Did you go, oh my goodness, this is something different?
Nope, it did not.
Oh, interesting.
Because there was a part one and a part two.
Okay.
Bruce came to me November 71 with a fellow by the name of Tinker, who was sort of his sound man, manager, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah.
And nice guy. And he had good ears. He walks in with Bruce. Bruce sits down at the piano. I'm standing, and so is Tinker. Work with the West Farrell organization, where all the Partridge Family stuff actually was created.
Yes.
And he's sitting on a bench, a stool, and starts to play two songs. One was about a woman who's deaf, dumb, and blind. And then the other one, I can't remember myself. Okay. Both of them absolutely had no effect on me. What had an effect on me was the intensity, which was how he sung it, that really enthralled me and got me to sit up and pay attention. And it was a voice, and I'm not given to hearing voices.
Yes.
That said, in no uncertain terms, this guy's a superstar. And I said, I lifted my head for a second, and I almost said, what? Out loud, but I didn't. And Bruce was still singing. And I just said, oh, well, whatever, and I let it go. And then when he finished, I said, you have any more songs? He says, no. I said, well, you want an album deal, right? He says, yeah, I want an album deal. Well, you came up with 2 songs. So what are we going to do about the deficit in songs? So he said, I'm going to go back to, San Mateo, and my parents are going to be out there for the Christmas holidays. I'm going to write all the songs then. When I come back, I'll have the songs together. Okay, can I do that? I said, you sure can. No problem. Looking forward to it. All right. That was the first meeting, just like that, 2 songs and out the door. And I totally forgot about them. Right.
Sure. Because, right. I mean, this happens all the time. There are like everyone says, oh, I have a book in me, but does everyone have the discipline and the talent to actually follow through? Right. So I could certainly see you going, nice kid, good voice, we'll see move on. What's next?
Exactly right. Yeah. The proof is in the pudding. He'll be back or he won't be.
Yeah.
Or he'll be back with fluff and it won't matter anyway. So February, the phone rings. The girl at the front desk says, hey, Mike, there's a Bruce Springsteen on the phone. I said, I don't know any Bruce Springsteen. She said, well, he says he knows you. I said, I don't know a Bruce Springsteen. Wouldn't I tell you if I did? And then he says, he's the guy that came with Tinker. I said, oh, that guy. Okay. So I picked up. And then he said, hey, I got the songs, blah, blah, blah. I said, can you come up at around 5 o'clock today? He said, sure. I said, see you then. Boom. Phone goes down. That's it. He comes in at 5 o'clock. I'm sitting there with Jimmy Creticus and Bob Spitz, another writer from our little organization there that wrote books on Dylan and the Beatles that were quite successful and quite good too. In any case, Bruce opens up his case and plays, I think, If I Were the Priest, the first song. And I said, geez, love it. I said, boy, that's different. I said, well, look, well, go ahead, keep playing. And then he does this Bus Stop, and then, Saint in the City. And he played a couple of songs that devastated me, just lyrically devastated me. And I said, would you mind singing that song? That line in that song, with my star studs and duds, just like a Harley and he, So he sings that line again. And I said, that's what I thought you said. I said, man, that's a great bit of symbolism. I mean, Jesus. I mean, wow. I mean, I'm very impressed here. I am very. So I said, what do you guys think? And they all nodded. They were very impressed also. And Bruce finished up playing a bunch of other songs. And finally I said, well, okay. I think I speak for myself, for sure, Jimmy, and even Bob. I said, and we would like to try to help you get us, a record deal and go from there. I'm like, let's try to do this. Is that what you're looking to do? He said, yeah, that's just exactly what I'm looking to do. Okay, then leave the rest to us. I'll be in touch with you, and then we'll begin the beginning. And that's how it happened. The second time, we were blown to smithereens. We were absolutely, there was no mistaking anything. I had no second thoughts for a second. I knew I was leaving the Farrell organization as of that meeting. It was just a question of when I could do it. And I actually owed Wes the right to listen to Bruce, and I brought it to him. He listened to it and couldn't see a thing. Couldn't hear, and I had the tape and everything. He couldn't hear it for the love him. He was a guy that was, born to do a certain thing, and he loved that thing. He relished in that environment, and he was terrific in that environment. I mean, Westbrook Boys, which the Beatles covered.
Sure.
I mean, he did a load of hits. He wrote a load of hits, not just the ones with me, but other ones. And then he published a load of other hits that other writers wrote. He was a good guy, good looking guy. He was a force to reckon with if you had to go up against him in business and with his organization, competing with some other organization just like him, to try to get the next Partridge Family or the next Archies of, Monkeys, what have you. So I always felt bad that Wes didn't want it, but I knew that Wes didn't get it.
Yeah.
And he didn't get to Sirloin Baltimore. I played him those things too. Never got it. It just was not too heavy, too loud. He couldn't digest it. He didn't know where it was going. Wes was a guy who was brought up on piano. I was brought up on guitar. So for me, it was a little easy to make the transference from where I was with Wes to those kind of acts, Bruce and Sirloin Baltimore, because of my guitar background. I love guitars. I wanted Bruce to have more guitars on his records, but he said, Mike, that's not me. And I had to take that,
Yeah.
And that's another thing. I felt that I would become too overbearing if I stayed on too long with Bruce. Could I have done another album or two? Yes. Okay, I could have. Actually, the next album I wanted Bruce to do was a live album. I didn't want him to have to compete with the songs I want to run right away. It would be too soon and too arduous a task.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I thought, let's buy Bruce some time to do another great album, studio album, but let's have something to capture all this, the Time in Newsweek and all the fanfare. Let's capture that too.
Yeah.
And get away with one of our, albums that we're supposed to do for Columbia Records. Yeah. Satisfy one of those things. So in any case, what happened is the litigation kind of got we all got caught up in that. And so that sort of ended everything. I mean, then I had a lot of regrets because of that, because there was a lot of things I wanted to do with Bruce, which I never got a chance to do. And, so those regrets will go,
Yeah, we'll get into that. I would like to go back just where did you grow up? And was there a lot of music in your household with your parents when you were growing up? And what kind of music did you enjoy as a teenager and as you started, finding adulthood?
Well, my mother was a first class singer and would have been Dinah Shore had she not decided to have more children and
Okay.
opt out. She started in the Brill building where I started. Can
Wow.
you imagine? My mother, that's right. She started in the Brill building. My father tells me this when I'm driving down Broadway with him one time. He says, I used to drop your mother off here. She used to take her singing lessons in here. I said, what? He said, yeah, she used to take a singing lesson there. Oh, this guy, Ticka Freeman, blah, blah, blah. The guy with Dinah Shore today? I said, well, actually, I don't know about it, but I'll look into it, which of course I have.
Sure.
And he was the guy that used to announce Dinah Shore, Ticka Freeman, Ticker, not Tipper, Ticker.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's her story. She was a great singer during the war years. She sung with the Walter Wanger Orchestra. My father could listen to her on the bass in Manchester, New Hampshire. She sung with Walter Wanger. Walter Wanger was the producer of Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor. Okay,
Wow.
20th Century Fox. Okay, look him up. Walter Wanger. She used to sing, all his songs, and in his orchestra. And my father could listen to that every day. We lost the recordings because that particular radio station in Manchester, New Hampshire, had a fire, and all those
Oh,
tapes all burned. It was a heartbreaker. But Ticka Freeman has a son who did something on what the hell was it? With the not the BIC. I'm trying to. Oh, for goodness sakes, the BBC.
right.
That's right. Some show with the BBC where he's talking about his father, Ticka Freeman. And I'm going to try to get a hold of this guy because I got his name recently. And I'm going to see if I can't get a hold and see if his father had kept any logs with
Yeah.
things on my mother, because that would be
Yeah. That
a
would be
treasure.
very cool. Yeah,
That
that'd be
would be
great.
a very great family heirloom if I could come across those.
Yeah.
But she used to sing with the Teddy Wilson Trio. She used to sing with the Harry. What the heck was his name? It'll come to me. They had the
Okay.
Dipsy Doodle. He had the Dipsy Doodle, My Reverie. Those were big hits back then. It's Harry something, but another two
Okay.
Harrys are coming into my head. I can't
Yeah.
think of which one it is now. But I remember seeing my mother sing those two songs. At the
Hmm.
Huntington Crescent Club when my father was the president of the club at the time. And then we would go to the Blue Spruce Inn in Roslyn Harbor to see my mother sing with the Teddy Wilson Trio. I mean, Teddy Wilson Trio was with Duke Ellington and
Sure.
Louis Armstrong. I mean, she sings Satin Doll. I used to go up there and watch her sing. She was first class singer. She could sing artsy songs like I can't. In other words, I need some melody to kind of grab onto. And my mother doesn't need any such thing. She's like Frank Sinatra. You take Foggy Day in London Town. You all listen to that song.
Yeah.
My mother sings it like a bird. She always says, Ticka Freeman sung the song and played the song for me one time, and that was all I needed. I mean, when you hear Foggy Day in London Town, you only have to hear that once and you can sing it. Oh boy, you're
Yeah.
hot stuff. That's my mother. I can't
Wow.
sing like that. I kind of round things off to the nearest decimal and hope for the best,
Yeah.
but not her. Not her. She could really sing, She was fantastic. But that's how I got started. She got me started. First record she played for me was Hank Williams, You're Cheating Hard. And he was on the MGM record label, Yellow and Black label, as I recall, looking at that Webcore recording machine in my head right now in front of me. And she bought me all my early records, from Roll Over Beethoven to Endless Sleep,
Yeah.
oddball stuff, for her, But she was great that way. She loved music. She
It
would
didn't
dance.
matter what genre. I mean, Teddy Wilson, right, is considered one of the leading,
Yep,
pianists of the big band jazz era, right? I
yep,
mean, that
yep,
he played with everyone. And so,
yep.
yeah. So it sounds like, she didn't care. If it was music, she loved it. And then
That's
she's
it.
passed that love to you.
No question about it. She did. And what I always used to get a kick out of, really, we had a black maid called Mary, and my two sisters would when I come home from St. John's University, because because I was a day student and I was a commuting student.
Mhm.
But I had access to a car every day, so I had no problem getting
Yeah.
to and from the university. I come home, I'd find them all dancing and singing to, Marvin Gaye's, Hitchhike Baby. Hitchhike Baby. My mother's dancing with the
Mhm.
maid and my two sisters in the living room. That's how my mother was. She had no barriers, certainly because of race or anything like that. She didn't
Yeah.
give it. She was she didn't care about it, who you were, what you were. She just never had any of that. Never crossed her mind somehow. And all I could say is she's the one that really got me started. Bought my first guitar. It was a horrible harmony acoustic guitar. You had to
Mhm.
stand on the strings to make a sound because the action was so poor on it. But I had to take that guitar and learn how to play, Buffalo Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight. But I finally convinced her to let me, buy the records I wanted, and I'd
Yeah.
try to learn off those records, and I'd buy an electric guitar, which I did. And a
Mhm.
black and white Dan Electro was my first electric guitar, and it was. I found I could pick up the riffs off the records pretty good. I didn't have too much trouble once my fingers had calluses on them.
Mhm.
And I also loved James Burton on the Ricky Nelson show. James Burton, you could see him; he would be on the show. You could actually watch him play like guitar solos
Yeah.
on the show, and you'd see the fingering he did. I was desperate every Friday night, whatever it was, to see Ricky sing his new song with James Burton playing it.
Mhm.
James Burton rocked my soul. And I got a great story for you
Please.
with regard to James Burton. We were Bruce was about to do some kind of guitar solo on Backstreets on the Born to Run album, and I went up to him and I said, you know, why don't we think a little differently? Instead of you trying to come up with something off the top of your head, and maybe it being a mediocre solo, why don't we try to create one from scratch that's melodic that won't be forgotten the next day? All right. He said, what do you have in mind? He's pretty open about it. What do you have in mind? I said, I want you to come back with me to my office because there's a record I want to play for you. And it's got a guitar player that's just incredible on it. Okay. And I want you to see what I'm talking about, hear what I'm talking about. We go back to the office. I play Hello, Mary Lou by Ricky Nelson, written by Gene Pitney. And the solo comes up. Boom, oh, it's the funkiest little melodic rocking guitar solo by James Burton. And after the song's over, I said, well, what did you think of the guitar solo? He said, I loved it. I said, me too. I said, do you think between the two of us here, we can I'll yell out to you and I think you did something great. You say, hey, I want to do this. I want to connect this with that. And we'll try to get through this together. If I become too much of a problem, I'll shut up and sit down. Okay. We started. We stayed there about an hour between the two of us, yelling out, shouting out, do this. No, go back to the riff you did before that. We get through this whole thing and he says, I got it. I said, good. It's good. I can remember this thing. It's good. This is one of these things this is what I was talking about. He did. Now, can you remember it by the time we get from here to the studio again? Because now we're in my office at 75 East 55th Street, between Park and Madison,
Yeah.
not 9th and 10th Avenue. Okay. So we went back, took a cab on the way back. And he got there. When the minute we got in, we recorded, boom. I was so thrilled to get that. So when you listen to that guitar solo, that's how that came about. It wasn't just some guy, doing it off the top of his head.
And the solo on which song?
Backstreets.
Backstreets, the solo on back. God, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's amazing. Um, it's fascinating, right? How sometimes the sausage is made. I remember I was at I was in Nashville. My wife and I were on vacation and we were going through different exhibits and there was one about songwriting. And there was an exhibit, Tom T. Hall was talking about that I love, he says, is horrible. He said, because it took me only 5 minutes to write. It became a $1 million seller. And people think, oh, that's the way it happens. And he goes, that is the rarity. That does not happen ever.
Right.
He said, and that's a great story. I want to get back to Bruce in a minute, but how did you end up working at the Brill Building, which is funny because your mom had been, there, and then you ended up, I mean, because talk about a historic place, when you think
Sure.
about all the songwriters and all the great music has come from there. How did you end up spending time there?
Well, it's very simple. I had a band
Okay.
out on Long Island, boys from Old Brookville, right? And what happened was we finally wrote a bunch of songs, instrumentals.
Okay.
And we said, well, we want to do demos on these. We want to make these into like records. Well, the only place we could do that was, in Manhattan somewhere. And we found actually it was Bell Labs. That's what it was called at the time. Not even Bell Sound System, Bell Labs.
Mm-hmm.
That was like 1958. And we all went into town, recorded all those songs that we had written. And then I said, well, where are all the record companies where I could sell these masters, hopefully? And they were in places like 1650, 1697, and 1619 Broadway. And that's how I got into those buildings. That's how I started out. Now, when I started out, I got very lucky in certain ways, like Dick Jacobs, who was the head of A&R at Decca Records at the time. He had an office in 1697 Broadway. Decca Records was putting out a lot of country music through their Nashville office, and they were sending all those records to Dick Jacobs in New York to see if he could get them played somewhere on the radio. But there was no country music in New York at the time, and so he when I walked in, he said, "I can't use your instrumental demos. We're not doing that. We're not buying that kind of material. And most of the stuff we buy is in Nashville, and this doesn't qualify for that." He says, "But I got all these dumb, these records here sitting here, these records that are supposed to be given out to promo guys at the record company that take the radio stations, and that's not happening. They're just piling up in a corner." There was this big pile of Decca albums, Kitty Wells and Hank Thompson, all these guys that were on the record label. And I said, geez, I said, well, I'll take them, he said, okay, go ahead. You can come by here, Mike, anytime you want and take them. And he was the guy that did the string lines for Buddy Holly on his songs at Python Studios in Manhattan. He wrote the string lines, okay? These guys were businessmen, but they weren't just businessmen. You go to Archie Blyer from Cadence Records, okay? Archie Blyer would have acts as different as Link Ray with Rumble, and the Chordettes with, my boy lollipop, okay? That's how his musical tastes went left or right, up and down. He could do anything. And he had the Everly Brothers. Then he had, Andy Williams, okay? I mean, this guy was all over the map with the acts he had. But the one thing he could do is make hits. He was an A&R man himself, but he could write charts. He was a businessman, but he could write charts. Now, you don't have any such thing today. There hasn't been anything like that. I have 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So you just don't get it. I mean, I could go in, walk and talk to Jerry Moss from A&M Records, okay? I could have a nice conversation on him about, the fact that they passed on Bruce. And he said that was particularly painful. He says,
right,
Mike, that was particularly painful when I found out that Chuck Cake passed on Bruce. I said, well, don't worry about it. I said, the truth, what I sent to Chuck, it was unfair because, there's who could cut those songs? I mean, who's going to cut Visitation Before Dawn? Nobody on the planet Earth but Bruce Springsteen, because it's so stylized for him. Right. It's not like when Neil Diamond wrote for the Monkees, I'm
Yes,
a believer.
exactly.
A lot of people could have done I'm a believer, but the Monkees did it, had a big hit with it. So, but Bruce wasn't writing like that. So, a different thing. It was so stylized to him, you couldn't get away with it. So, whatever it was. But there were people just like him all over the place. One of the most unusual things that happened to me in a world of coincidences, and I'm not finished with the Brill Building yet.
I know.
Either. Okay. No, you don't know, because I
Okay.
met my wife in the Brill Building. Okay. And I met her on the blackout, the night of the blackout in the Brill Building. All that happened in the Brill Building. My wife would be up at Pier International and Hoagie Carmichael would come out and hit on her and sit on her desk. Can you imagine Hoagie Carmichael, off the
No.
Lake River, Georgia, on my mind? He wrote all those songs. He was a giant. He was a movie star as well as a writing hit writer star too. He was up there. The Rolling Stones would come up to the office there. Buddy Holly's wife worked in the same office my wife did, in the copyright department.
Wow.
All right, is that just off the wall nuts? Okay,
That
that's the Brill
is.
Building. Yeah, that is. You're darn straight. Hey, I ended up working for Hugo and Luigi in the Brill Building. That's why they wrote every Sam Cooke produced, every Sam Cooke hit record Sam ever had. And Sam had a load of them. Okay. And they also produced, The Lion Sleeps Tonight, okay, with the Tokens. And they produced Little Peggy March. I love him. And when he goes, they also wrote Can't Help Falling in Love with You for Elvis. Okay, not so bad, huh?
No,
So
that's
bad.
okay. That's pretty decent.
Yeah, not bad. And then, of course, I got in touch because I was already in the building. I got in touch with Lieber and Stoller, and they were, I don't know whether they were upstairs from us or downstairs, but they were in the building. I went to them with a group called Montana Flintlock, which was like a Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young knockoff, which was a shame because they were really good, but it was a knockoff. Who was I kidding? And nobody. But they did love them, and we went and recorded them in Nashville, Tennessee, and we used Weldon Myrick, who was the pedal steel guitar player on Neil Young's "Heart of Gold" song, and he was wonderful. A wonderful way of where they record down there, and the shorthand they used is terrific when you first are exposed to it down there. They know what they know all the chords, and you play your chords one through, and they just keep writing. Say, okay, got it. And I'm not used to that. I'm used to, well, look, let me go over it again. Make sure I got it, Mike, got it. And sure enough, they do. That shorthand really works well. But nothing ever happened there because the partners, Lieber Stoller's partners in Nashville, got into some kind of problem with how they wanted to sell the record and who they wanted to record company. They wanted to sell their recording studios down there, and it became a whole fiasco. And I ended up with my album and with no place for it to go, and it couldn't go anywhere because they were still fighting it, and I didn't know whether I was going to end up having to give it back to them after I gave it to somebody else. So I just let it die, and it did die finally forever. But yes, so I did get into the Brill Building, and I got to know a lot of people in that Brill Building. And it was fortuitous for me, but I also got to know people in 1650. Like I have this musical that I've been working on for close to 20 years, and I'm down to the last strokes on it, thank God. But I realized that I didn't know anything about making Broadway musicals, and that I had to learn the entire craft from writing the songs for it. And I won't bore you to tears with all the other things you have to learn if you want to go to Broadway for real. But I was writing this song about Hank Williams Sr., Hank's Last Shot, it was called. And it was about his life, basically.
Sure.
And I had to do some research on it. So I went into the library, got some magazines out that had some interviews with Hank Williams Sr. One of them was by Ralph Gleason. Ralph Gleason was kind of like this guy that started Rolling Stone back in the day. He started the Monterey Jazz Festival. He helped Lenny Bruce with his legal bills, when he was in trouble with the law, for cursing, on his live shows and all that kind of stuff. So he was a real maverick and a real player and a real, personality to contend with, this Ralph Gleason character. And I think he was even responsible for the first FM station in California, KSAN radio in San Francisco. So, a force to reckon with. I read this article, and he's interviewing Hank Williams, and he says, "Hank, do you have any favorite singers?" And he says, "Yeah, Bill Darnell." And I said to myself, I wonder if that's the same Bill Darnell that I sold my little instrumental song to his Portrait Records, in 1650 Bill. Is that the same Bill Darnell? Could that ever be the same guy? So I go ahead and go onto the internet and look up Bill Darnell. The minute I see the first picture come up, I said, "That's him. That's it." So here I am writing a song about, Hank Williams Sr., and he asked them the question about who's your favorite singer, and it's the guy who signed me in the Brill Building. It's like, give me a break. That's a real wild thing. The guy became a good friend of mine, Bill Darnell. Yeah. Symmetry, you just say, where is that? Happenstance. I don't know if it's happenstance. I think that these things in my particular life are the things that keep me going, because it's like, Mike, there's a divine hand, guiding you. Just don't argue too much, and don't be too quick to judge, because that's one of my. If I have a flaw, if I have flaws, one of them is that I'm judgmental. Quick. Okay. I quickly make a judgment about something or somebody, and then I find out later, where the hell were you at? You were completely wrong. Completely wrong. You know what you're talking about. You know, you gotta cut that out. So these are the things you do as of course as you get older. you get on your case a little bit more, because you don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, and you want to say, oh, all right, I'm getting better. I'm getting better. So before I pass away here, I want to make sure that I get to a lot of things that I haven't gotten to, which I am in the process of doing.
Yeah, I'm excited. So one of the things that frustrates me as a fan is I will discover a musician, or I'll discover a TV show, or I'll discover a book, and I'll almost be, I'll be prophesizing about it, right? I'm this voice in the wilderness saying, "Oh, this TV show is so great. Why aren't more people watching it? This musician is so great. Why aren't people listening to it?" So, and I'm not connected. So talk to me about, you've heard Bruce, you've determined the kid may have a little something, and you've decided, and then you're going out, and you're young, you're full of energy, and you're trying to get people to notice, and it took a little time. So tell me some stories of those early days.
Well, it's like, well, it did and it didn't take time. Let me say it to you like that.
Okay.
What initially happened, I think, was that how do I put this in layman's terms? My expectations were such that it gave me kind of superhuman powers.
Okay.
To speak in the vernacular that you'll understand a little bit. Things opened up to me, so much so, not because of my desire, but because of my expectation. Bruce Springsteen was so good that I had expected everybody to like him. I didn't think he needed a band. I just think he needed him, his guitar, and his voice.
Okay.
Right? That was not to be, obviously. He obviously ended up with the E Street Band, and Clive Davis and Bruce both wanted it, and my partner at the time, Jimmy, wanted it. And me and Hammond were the only ones that were held out for Bruce. Just with his guitar would be sufficient. In retrospect, I think everybody was right. I was wrong. I think John was wrong with me on that one. In any case, that happened quickly. He got signed to the William Morris Agency quickly. Everything happened very, very quickly in the first month or two.
Okay.
Then reality set in. Now you got to go make this record. When you finish with that record, then you got to go out and you got to hit the road, and you got to most likely start from scratch. You got to go into bars.
Right.
Got to play bars. Now, of course, there were an abundance of bars back and then that there aren't today. So you couldn't even do today the kind of things we did. But we did do that, and we started to build a little teeny following. Okay, the first record came out and kind of didn't make much of an impact. Then we did a second record, and it didn't do much of an impact, and we were just barely staying alive because we had a good, great black manager at William Morris Agency who just loved Bruce Springsteen. He
Okay.
loved that. He loved that first album, and he wanted to. He got it in his head that he wanted to make this happen. He was a black man going to make the next Bob Dylan in his mind. Okay, that's what he was thinking. So
Okay.
I said, well, good, whatever, whatever gets you on Bruce's side, I'll back that. So we kept going. Finally recorded Born to Run. And then the brakes were put on by the record label. They were not giving us attention because Clive Davis, our champion advocate, whatever you want to call him, got fired by Columbia Records because, he had spent money on a bar mitzvah, from corporate funds, which should have been expended, for hiring, promotion men, not, whatever the expenses were for the bar mitzvah. So he got fired. He went over to Arista, became a big success. Clive is what he is. But for us, that was a disaster because we lost our backer. And now what happens is now you're in with a load of guys who I actually like. A lot of those guys I like. Charlie Koppelman. I know you had Brian Koppelman on not too long ago. Charlie, his father, was a good old friend of mine, a great guy. He publishes some of my songs right to this day. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've written for him. So I know just what I'm talking about when I said it.
Sure.
And his biggest writer was my best friend, and he was in two bands of mine, Alan Gordon, the guy that wrote all the Turtleheads, Celebrate for Three Dog Night.
Okay.
My Heart Belongs to Me for Barbra Streisand. Okay, whatever. All right, that's my friend Alan Gordon. Great guy, terrific guy, funny fellow too. Now he's passed on. It's a shame, man. Really, colon cancer. And in any case, I'm just trying to think what was my point of bringing up Charlie Koppelman, or Brian Koppelman.
Well, because you were saying, and I take it you never lost faith. Like
That's
you,
correct.
even after the first two albums, you're like, people are gonna get this. I believe that this man has the talent.
Right.
The light switch will click. Right. Sometime.
And at some time, right? But I'm an impatient guy.
Sure.
And so sometime wasn't coming fast enough for me. So I said to myself, well, let's start the third album. Let's see whether I can get these guys off the dime. So we finally finished after 6 months, Born to Run. Born to Run was like, this monstrosity of a record. I mean, there's things on there that you hear for 2 or 3 seconds, and they took us forever. And they're like string sections that come on for 3 or 4 seconds, and then they're gone. That's it. Just that little moment in time. That's it. Boom. So a lot of time and effort and energy was spent on that single song. The two of us go to meet with Steve Popovich, who was the head of promotion for Columbia Records. And when I walk in, Bruce didn't want to come up with me because I think he was just too afraid to face any suit, if you will. And this was a guy that I liked. I liked
Sure.
Steve. But he just didn't have. If he didn't love it, it would be a knife in Bruce's heart. Okay.
Right.
Bruce was putting all his eggs in that basket. I went up there, and of course, when I walk in, Steve is on the phone. He's got 2 phones on each ear. Back in the day, they used to have phones. Remember phones?
Sure.
And he had one on each ear talking to his promotion man all around the country, right? And I said, Steve, I'll come back. No, nonsense. Give me the tape. And then he goes back. He's talking while he's putting the tape on. He's talking to one of the promotion men out there in Chicago. So he listened to Born to Run, and it's blasting. And he's talking on the phone. I don't know how he's hearing who he's talking to. I don't know how he's hearing the record or paying attention to it. So when it finally ends, I said, well, what do you think? He says, well, I like the riff. He says, I don't know too much about anything else, Mike. I said, all right, look, I said, I'll get back to you in time. And I walked out, told Bruce. He was devastated. And what are we going to do now, Mike? I said, well, that's a good question. I don't know. I said, why don't you go home to Staten Island? Why don't you go home to Asbury Park? I'll go to my office. And if I think of anything, I'll get back to you. Well, just as I was entering my building, I did think of something. I said, supposing, since we made a load of friends at FM radio, I took the Born to Run master and sent that tape around to 50 of our friends in tertiary, secondary, primary markets, okay? And that they went on it, and they went on it. And they did go on it, 50 of them, okay? And when they went on it, it sent all the college kids running into the record stores to buy the album. There was no album, okay? So this is the mortal sin that a guy like me can commit on behalf of a record company, is to give them the single before the album's in the store. Okay,
Right.
there's the cardinal sin. That's a mortal sin. All right. I knew that going in. And Bruce, when he heard me to tell him that that's what I was going to do, says, he says, I don't know what to expect. I said, well, that makes two of us. I don't know what to expect exactly either. What do you think I am? I can't see the future. I'm not prognosticating it. I'm just hoping that this works. Okay.
I mean, because at this point, you know, your thought is, what do I got to lose? Right. I've got to try something different.
Exactly.
And so
Can't do it the conventional way.
Right. And so, and you knew you had something special. Like, did you think Born to Run was another level from the other songs that he had been doing?
Not so much the other songs, but what it was it was a heavier song, and right in your, Smash Mouth rock and roll, right in your face, still having his brand of sophisticated poetic lyrics. Okay. So, but it was a step up in every regard, really. I wouldn't say it was like better than all songs, because there was some. I mean, if you listen to New York City Serenade and you listen to some of these others, there are some incredible songs there, and some incredible statements, and some great atmosphere and whatever. But the fact is, yes, to be the first song off the album, and to try to make the album stand on the back of Born to Run success, and yes, it was that. It fulfilled those promises.
I've heard my first musical love was Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys.
Well, that's everybody's.
Yes, right. And so you hear stories of him doing Pet Sounds and Good Vibrations that same way, right? Spending hours on something that may only last 3 or 4 seconds on the album, right?
Yeah, seconds.
And so when I hear you telling that story, I think of that kind of that tapestry to speaking of Brill Building, right? Carol King, but building that tapestry and building that, and you're like, in a lot of ways, I picture, a young Mike Appel taking, okay, I've got $100. I'm going to put it on one number on the roulette table and go.
Correct.
Here we go.
And throw the dice. That's right.
Yes.
Throw the dice. That is exactly what we did. And we did actually get lucky there, because when I say we got lucky, I got in hot soup first.
Yes, exactly. Right.
It didn't happen immediately. What happened was everybody called the local, promotion men for Columbia, saying, "Hey, what's this record on the radio?" And then it's not in the stores. All these store managers called, their local Columbia record, office, promotion office. And then it got back to, the heads of Columbia Records. And it wasn't just the heads of Columbia Records. It went above that. It went to, CBS.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to tell you the guy that called me, but he calls me. I pick up the phone and he says, "Mike," in that nice, quiet voice, "what are you doing?" That's what he says. And I go to start to explain it. The minute I start opening my mouth, "I know what you're trying to do, and I don't like it one bit, and you know it." And he said, "I can't believe you're doing this." He said, "You never put the record in the, on the radio before the record's in the stores." I said, "Well, you won't give me the money to do the record so I can put it in the store." So I get mad at him, right? And he said, "Mike, you're not listening to me." Click. Oops. Now I don't even have a chance to talk to him and say anything, and say, "Well, look, I can't even make amends." He's gone, right?
Yes.
Now I'm saying to myself, is the next thing I'm going to hear, or the next thing I'm going to get a little note from the, inner council of the legal council of Columbia Records to Mike Appel, your services are no longer, warranted and necessary, okay, or wanted. And so I was very, very worried about getting such a thing. But at the moment, we had another thing to contend with. Bruce had to go play this gig at Brown University, and Brown University wanted me to allow them to have an interview with Bruce, and I said okay. I said I called Bruce. I said do this interview with the Brown University Press. They've been good to us. I think the College Station played his music a lot. Et cetera, et cetera. So Bruce, Bruce was trying to help you. He wasn't being obstinate in any way whatsoever. So he goes and he does the interview. But before he does, I said, they just got this new president. His name is Erwin Siegelstein. He came from, the television division. I don't know if he's going to know anything. I don't know if he's going to be much help to us, getting our budget given to us. And, I don't know, man. I said, I really don't know. His name is Erwin Siegelstein. But I know, that's all I can tell you. He's the new guy, and we're going to have to deal with him. So that's it. Bruce goes, does the interview, does a great job with, at the college, his normal blitzkrieg, and boom.
Yeah.
Then I get a call from none other than Erwin Siegelstein the next day. I get on the phone with him. He says, my son goes to Brown University, Mike. And I say, what the hell is this going to be? And so he says, Bruce badmouthed me in the interview that he did yesterday with Brown University Press. And my son is a huge fan, and all of his friends are huge fans, and it made him look terrible. I said, I said to him, I got him. Okay. He's a good Jewish uncle. I have had a few myself, and they're great. When you get a good one, they're great. Okay. So anyway, I said, well, geez, I hate to tell you this, but I said, Bruce is going to do an interview at Rolling Stone. I want to make sure I can get a hold of him, make sure he doesn't say anything bad. Said, you get a hold of him and make sure he doesn't say anything bad. And I want to see you. I want to see Bruce. I want to see your lawyer tomorrow at Mercurio's for lunch. And let's get this thing together here. Okay, you hear me? No more Rolling Stone bad. I said, no, I'll get a hold of him. There was no interview at Rolling Stone.
Okay.
I didn't have to do anything. So I just figured, hey, strike while the iron's hot. You just advantage Appel. All of a sudden, when he said to me about his son, I said, that's it, advantage Appel. So I took advantage. And then the next day when we went to the lunch, he was this most buoyant character. And he was absolutely as gracious a host as you'd want for lunch. And he said, no Rolling Stone interview, right? I said, well, you didn't hear of any, did you? He said, nope, I didn't. I said, it's not going to be one. He says, you can do your third album. I grant you that. I grant you the budget. No problem. And so we all sat down and had a wonderful lunch, and that was it. And that's how we got back to being able to do the rest of the songs, the other 8 songs that hadn't been done yet. And those 8, so what we had had to accomplish. And then in the background, you have the beginnings of the lawyers getting in touch with my accountants, and like as though I'm some thief, and it just says, oh boy, much ado over nothing.
Well,
but what can you do?
I was really impressed that in Bruce's autobiography, he says, this is my side of the story, but go read Mike's side of the story. He actually listed your book. And so I did. I went and read it, and I enjoyed your book immensely. And obviously, this is going to be hard, but let's forget financially. Did this personally cause you pain? Because you were one of Bruce's first cheerleaders. You believed in him. You believed in that magic, and to split up with him and then to see what happened. How long did it take you to adjust to that? And before we hit record, you shared some pretty insightful thoughts, and I hope you can repeat them.
Okay. Well, the thing is this, when I got served papers in June or something like June or July
Yeah.
of I guess it was 1976. I went to Jules Kurz and he said, well, I know a lawyer. I can't do this for you. I'm not a litigator. He said, you go to this guy and, you know, he's one of those litigators and he's a damn good one. I said, okay, whatever. You know, I'm just saying to myself, I just got this, you know, in the mail here. And now I know I got absolutely problems to deal with.
Right.
And I don't know how I'm going to circumvent them or make it through that whole process. But in any case, I go over to Leonard Marks and he says, when I walk in the door, he says, hand me those papers. I hand him the papers. He looks at them. He says, you got any papers, any documents for Bruce? I said, yes. He says, get them for me, have them here tomorrow morning. It's a divorce. Just like that. And I said, what do you mean it's a divorce? We just got the papers today. We haven't even negotiated anything yet. Nobody's talked to anybody. How can it be a divorce? How can it be over? He says, it's a divorce. I'm telling you, this is over. I can't go back. Well, I don't know if I could have gone back, actually, to tell you the truth. If I went to another lawyer, I don't know if I demanded it. I don't know if that was possible. Maybe things were too far gone, but maybe when Bruce finally signed off on that, that was it. He ain't going back either. So he doesn't want to look like a fool. I don't know. You never know what the other side's thinking or saying because you're not talking to them. Nobody's confiding in anybody. So the lawyer said, don't talk to him. Don't talk to this guy. Don't talk to that guy. You say, okay, whatever. And I just left his office bewildered. I went out into Central Park and I just stayed out all day. It was like 11 in the morning. I didn't go back to my office till 5 or 6. I don't even remember going back to my office. I may have just gone to my car and drove home. I just, you're what you put your heart and soul in, you gave up a lot, not only a lot of time, but I mean, you were betting on him to make it. And now he's made it. And now you aren't going to be able to, have any of the fruits of your own damn labor. You know what I mean? Without a fight. Maybe you get some kind of settlement here and you'll get some sort of money out of it, but your history, your persona non grata. And that was quite bothersome to me. It was quite bothersome to me. I didn't like it. It's the first time it ever happened to me. I mean, first, of course, was Bruce a litigator before this? No. Was John Lando a litigator? I don't think so. Yeah. So all three of the actual principals never did this before.
Right.
You have all newbies going through this process. And it was going to cost us a lot of money. And it did cost us a lot of money, all of us. And it caused a lot of aggravation to all of us. Nobody got away without the aggravation. Everybody got it. But not too long after, things came into my life, books and philosophy came into my life that changed me forever. And they made me realize that Mike, you did your job. You were part of a trio that came into this world. You had things that you were going to do. John Lando had things he was going to do. Bruce Springsteen had things he was going to do. You were the guy that was supposed to get it off. This is what I finally deduced. And yet, John was the guy to take it the rest of the distance, which he's done, he did a handsomely good job, okay?
Yes.
Doing just that. Because I know that. I tell it to him all the time, but, I say, listen, I know what you did, buddy. Okay. You don't have to say a thing to Mike Appel. I already got it. Okay. I know the rough waters and the treachery of being Bruce Springsteen's manager or producer, whatever you want to call yourself. That's it. That's a tough gig. Everybody's looking to stab you. They're looking to, get in there on the inside and make a wedge between you. That's why I almost never If I do something that I want Bruce to know, I send it to him too, so that everybody gets something. So John never thinks I'm trying to be cute and go behind his back, pull some kind of nonsense.
Because you
Not
understand,
once.
right? Like you understand that
Yeah.
relationship because you've been
Yeah.
there, and you mentioned the divorce, right? Like I was the first wife, so I am not going to get around between the second wife and the second spouse,
That's
right?
that's
I,
exactly right. That's
I
exactly
think
right.
that, yeah, that makes sense.
It did make sense to me. And I said, first of all, I have to have my own integrity.
Yeah,
If John thinks I'm like some sleazebag, how am I ever going to actually deal with this guy?
yeah,
I can't deal with this guy like that. It has to be on, above board all the way down the line. If he doesn't like something, then John, come on, tell me what it is you don't like, and we'll have it out, okay? And then boom, 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 until we're both satisfied.
and you mentioned earlier that before we hit record, you said that one of the things you think may have hurt you is John and you had not had a chance to get to know each other, that you
Right,
didn't have a chance for you to understand him and where he was coming from, and for him to understand you and where you're coming from. Because obviously both of you cared about Bruce, not just as a person, but as an artist.
right. There's no question about that. I felt that if he had known me, and maybe there had been no Bruce Springsteen in his life, in either of our lives, and we just ran into each other somewhere. Some lawyer put us together and said, "Hey, why don't you guys maybe get together and form a
Yeah,
team?" And blah 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 blah. We might have hit it off fantastic and become great friends, and did God knows what.
sure.
Okay, but the fact is that didn't happen, and we didn't have the advantage of even that happening, or him coming to me and saying, maybe Mike, maybe you could find a place for me here or something like that. It
Yeah,
was like, Bruce wants me to now be his producer. Maybe you should just maybe be the manager from here on out. And then the lawyer comes in and says, oh, well, yeah, instead of taking 20%, maybe we can have you take 10%. And it's like, hey, fella, we haven't gotten this guy to first, we got him. Yes. Well, I shouldn't say that. We got him to first base now. Now you want me to go take a lesser, cut me in
sure.
half, take away the production, to cut the management in half, and take the publishing away too. Are you, I don't have to do that without making you struggle for it, okay? And the guy, their attorney, I don't know, his attorney. It's
Sure.
not John. In fact, it wasn't even John Landau's attorney I'm talking about. The attorney I'm talking about, I'm not going to mention his name. I'm just going to say that he was really, a nasty individual. In other words, my lawyer was a nasty individual in certain ways, but he was a livable guy.
Yeah.
This guy was really not a livable guy. This guy was like a kind of like a dirty pool player.
Well,
I just couldn't. I mean, yeah, you can always say, hey, he's doing the best he can for his client. I said, there is a point when you're doing that, and then there's a point when I know that that what you're talking about is all bullshit. It's absolutely bullshit. I'm not guilty of any of this shit, and yet you're
yeah.
trying to pretend making me think that I'm guilty when I know I'm not guilty. So don't waste your breath on me, Jack. Waste it, save it for the judge.
Well,
Save it for your depositions.
and as you said, correct, that, and I don't mean this to hurt anyone's feelings, right? But financially, there is a quick settlement doesn't help attorneys. Now, and I'm sure there are wonderful attorneys out there that have their best interests, their clients, but there are other attorneys that billable hours and what you can do, right? Like making things simple doesn't make you as much money.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
No question about it. I mean, that was a lesson I learned. I mean,
Yeah.
I've learned a number of lessons, I mean, I got ripped off by D. Anthony, I mean, definitely did. I mean, really, D was not, D said, he would take care of us and everything like that, and he didn't.
Yeah.
When it came to Sir Lord Baldwin, he took the production money and ran away with it.
Yeah.
But in any case, that's okay. I mean, that's your education. You don't go to college to be in the music business. You
Right.
know, you go into the music business and then you take your lumps, and that's your college education. And you get smart as you go along, and you can't get away from that.
How was your journey for, I'll use your words, divorce happens, you see Bruce's career, you go off and do other things creatively as well. Did, where was when did you become zen with this? When did you become to understand, well, I did my part and now then, you know, dates
1980,
1980, really?
February of 1980. I suddenly, like you want to use the word Zen, that's fine. Even though it's not. The
No.
fact is, it's it's a sacred sort of situation. You can't even look at it in terms like, hey, you lost the money. It's like you can't even talk to me like that. It's almost like
Yeah.
you don't understand me at all, fella. I mean, you think that I'm somehow mad that I didn't get this and I didn't get that. I'm not looking for that kind of glory. I was never looking. I mean, Bruce may have even thought that I had designs on being an artist. I gave that up. I don't know. I guess I didn't tell you. Um, uh, Doug Mars. I guess you know Doug Mars, who he is. I mean, I guess the biggest chairman CEO of all the biggest record conglomerates
Yes.
there are, from Universal, Sony to Warner's. But he was my big backer. He was Mike Appel to Bruce Springsteen. I was
Okay.
Bruce Springsteen back in the day. He was the guy. Doug Mars backed me. And one day I was one of the first record artists to be released on his new record label. I
Okay.
had already cut the song for it. I already sung it. Okay. And I walked in to his office. I said, "Hey, Doug, look, I got bad news, Doug." I said, "I found a guy that I want to back 100%. I don't want to, pursue a career on my own anymore. I'm giving that up. I just want to go work on this guy because this guy is really different and really top of the pops, if you want to use that terminology. And I'm sorry, but that's what I got to do. I got to do that." He said, "Well, what the hell? You're giving up? You're throwing away your whole career for this guy? Who the hell is this guy? What's his name?" So I say, "Bruce Springsteen." He said, "I never heard of him." I said, "You will." And then I just did an about face and I left. And of course, when I ran into Doug, when Bruce was being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I went into the men's room and I heard something, "Hey, Mike, hey, Mike." It was Doug. So we went through it. He told me the story once again that I just told you.
Yeah.
And then we went back outside, the boys' room. But it was. He said, I always tell you that story every time I see it, and I tell other people that story because how many times does that happen in an executive's life? And Doug was a guy that was a wonderful guy. He wrote Sweet Talking Guy for the Chiffons. I mean, he was a writer. That's what I mean about the guys back then. They were writers. They knew how to write charts. They could manage people. They could produce people. They know how to sell things and promote things, and still somehow they could be one person to do all those different chores. Doug was one of those guys. He's not a suit. He's a
Yeah.
guy that does new music, and he does gravitate towards it. And a good friend right to this day, this very day.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was just a special time in my life. But again, I knew that I was born to do certain things too, and I'm getting to those things now. It's just that to do the things that I need to be done, I needed to mature not only in the facets, let's say, of Broadway and
Yeah.
writing books and what kind of books I want to write, and how do I find the what should I say, the nuance of Mike Appel's artistry. How do I find that, and how do I nurture that to make me a particular type? That, oh, that must be a Mike Appel thing, or Mike Appel said
Yeah.
that. To find that uniqueness. And that's what's taken so damn long. And believe me, like I said, for a guy who has a short temper when it comes to patience, I've had to wait a long time.
So what's next for you? Tell me a little bit about what you've got on you're working on.
Well, I have a few projects I can't go into
I understand.
because they involve, big superstars
Okay.
and super personalities. And I don't want to say anything to those things are
Okay.
tied up, and maybe there'll be a joint statement. And I don't want to be talking out of school about things and,
Get you.
that I don't know about. And you're a good guy, you're a sweet guy. But I have to just shut my
Well, I'll
mouth.
tell you what, when they're
Easy.
ready to announce, you can come back and you can promote the hell out of it.
Hey, there
I
you
love
go.
that. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
So
That's true. But
what,
I do have my musical. I do have my
yeah,
musical.
tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, Stage Door Johnny. I've always been a guy that calls it as I see it.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard a good record in I don't know when. I don't know, 30, 40 years. I don't know.
Okay.
Like John Landau said to me, I don't know, maybe it was 10 years ago. He said this to me. I was saying to him, listen, I listen to new groups all the time. I said, I never hear anything, John. I never hear anything. He said, well, that's why I only had my, tape recorder only up to 1975. I haven't recorded anything after 1975. So I had to laugh at that. But that was me. You see, it's things like that. When he says things like that to me, it makes me think that we could have been great friends because he's like minds, think alike, and they can get along well. When they're at loggerheads, they can't. But I got along with John pretty good when it came to all of the songs. We didn't have too many fights over things. I mean, there's a couple of songs on Born to Run, Linda Let Me Be the One, and Lonely Night in the Park that didn't make the final cut on the album. And I think that John and Bruce did hope that I would like them because I think they wanted to pursue those things as perhaps pop, chances, pop suggestions that might, if they can do it, maybe work it out, maybe make it work.
Yeah.
But they seem to be so far left of center from where we were at the moment that I finally heard those things. It was like I wasn't hearing some fantastic pop rock songs, and I didn't know how they could make those two things like anything remotely like that. So I said, I don't think so, fellas. I just don't think they belong. And then there was the one on the Meeting Across the River, where Bruce was a little surprised that I liked it. He said, I got this new song. I want to play it for you. Okay, great. Sit down. He sits down at the piano. I'm sitting down at the piano stool. He goes through the song. I said, I absolutely love it. He says, why? I said, I'll tell you why. It reminds me of Naked City and late night on the Untouchables show after a mob hit and they blow that lonely saxophone. I said, there's something about the chord changes of the way you sing the song that makes me think that. And that's all I could say. That's why. Okay, that's why.
Mike, there is a collection of short stories that are all based on that song, that they published, that short mystery writers wrote, because that is such a cinematic song. That's good. Obviously my wife's name is Linda, so I always joke it, Linda Let Me Be the One. She rolls her eyes, but I always, on our anniversary, I go, and I'm so glad Linda did let me be the one. So one of my listeners wanted to know specifically about Cherokee Queen. He said there are certain songs, right, that when you guys were splitting up, you kept the rights for, and he specifically is just curious. That's his itch. And I said, well, I'll ask Mike about it, but I don't know if Mike will have any stories to tell.
About Cherokee Queen?
Yes.
I really don't have anything to say about it. I wasn't anything that I remember or even arguing about, or saying that I must have this, and that doesn't strike a chord with me. I don't know quite what to say about it. That's all.
Okay, that's fine. the when you, and I've taken so much of your time, I appreciate it. When you saw, did you have the sense of a proud parent when you saw Bruce going into the Hall of Fame? And I guess that's a dumb question, but when you think back on your experiences, what are your thoughts?
Well, you see, if you had been at that event, you would have realized what a star-studded event it really was.
Yeah.
I mean, I was sitting at a table right next to Wilson Pickett, Sir George Martin, uh, Chris White from Chrysalis Records, and there was one other person, but I can't remember who it was. But all of them, it's all star-studded guys. I mean, I even went, got over and whispered into Wilson Pickett's ears. I said to him, "Thank you, Wilson Pickett, for the midnight hour." And he said, "God bless you, son. God bless you. God bless you, my man. God bless you." and then later on, I spoke to Bruce, because Bruce did Midnight Hour with Wilson Pickett on stage with the E Street Band. And I actually spoke to Bruce after he did that. And he said, "Mike," he said, "the most fun I had on stage with Wilson Pickett was when he yelled, 'Bruce, Bruce,' in that raspy voice of Wilson Pickett. When he did that, he said, 'Yeah, I'm on stage with Wilson Pickett and he's calling my name.'" And it meant a lot. And when you think of Funky Broadway and all the great records that guy sung, and Land of a Thousand Dances, all those, the great his vocals were so great. The way they screamed. I mean, yeah, James Brown too. You say the same thing about James Brown, and you just fell in love with those guys. Like you just fell in love with those guys. I don't know what to say, but it come full circle that night to some extent. And I was very, very happy to be there and to enjoy the personalities that I had a chance to speak to, and the people that were, very thankful that I discovered the guy that I discovered, and that we hung in there with him until he made it. But how many Bruce Springsteens walking around? Not too many.
No, not too many.
Not too many.
All right. I honestly believe, right, that you never know, there's alternate realities and you could talk about, but there is, I was not over exaggerating when I say, when you talk about a founding father, we would not have had, I would think, this career without your nurturing him and your perseverance and your drive. And for all of us fans, as we're recording this, there's rumors that they may renounce a tour tomorrow, and we're all ecstatic. And so, Mike, I just want to say thank you for that. I thank you for all of that.
Well, I thank you for the compliment. It doesn't get any bigger or better than that. And I'm honored that you feel that way, because it's like I always say, I can match Bruce in the managerial area and in the production area and the promotion area if he delivers every night on stage. Does Bruce Springsteen deliver every night on stage for 4 hours straight everywhere on every city on the globe? Yes, he does. So Mike, get off your duff. Okay, you got work to do. And that's the way I looked at it, man.
Yeah.
He's doing it up there. I'm doing it over here. And that's
nice.
all of us do. You got to go do it. And it takes two to tango, and it did.
Yes. All right. Before I get to the Mary question, any final thoughts you want to share to my listeners?
Well, it's what I took up in my musical. I believe that there are some great musicians out there. I believe that there's talent out there, but they are lost. They're just roaming around in empty canyons with no, body to lead them anywhere. There are no Pied Pipers. There are no Bruce Springsteens leading them. Bruce Springsteen's part of the classic rock era. But guys, you got to go back there, because if you don't learn your history. Like Bruce used to always say, Mike, I know my history. He did know his history. He paid attention to his history. He learned those historical songs, those historical riffs, how they were put together, these horn sections, this, that, blah, 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 blah. He did it. How many years has he been touring his butt off, and how many cities and how many hours has he been rehearsing and on that damn stage? Forget about in the studio and writing time and rehearsing with the band, just being on the stage doing a real live gig. Huh? For 50 years, 4 hours a night? Hello? It's like you get a kid who's 1/3 his age, who can't sing an hour.
Yes.
Bruce is on there for 4 hours straight. So it's no joke. This guy's the real deal. I mean, he's as real as it gets, man. And we're guys that we're tough guys too. We could play. We were good. All right. So he comes from guys that know their stuff. And know other guys' stuff. Okay. So he was in good hands. He was in good hands for as long as I had him. He was in good hands, and he's been in good hands ever since. It's as simple as that.
I love that. All right. So Jay Armstrong, if you are listening to this podcast because you wanted to hear Mike's story, I hope you were as entertained as I was. I end every podcast with a question that Jay Armstrong, he is an honors English teacher and in the Philadelphia area, and he would take the song Thunder Road and would break apart for his seniors. They would look at all the lyrics. They would look at the imagery Bruce used, and they would compare it to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. And then he would ask his class at the end of the day, does Mary get in the car? So Mike, that's your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
She'd be a fool if she didn't.
Well said, sir. Well said. If someone wants to reach you or to follow you, what's the best way?
I guess it's just to go to the website, and you can leave an email, and I get them all, and I try to respond to all of them. I don't think I've ever not responded to an email.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. I am honored that we've gotten to spend some time together. I will say again, all that history that Bruce learned, you were a big part of that, and you were part of the thing that brought us this beauty. And for that, I am forever grateful. Long life, great success to you, my friend. You are just a treasure as well. And let's do this again sometime.
We will, definitely.
Listeners, you go get vaccinated, go get boosted, go be kind to each other, because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, listeners. And we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Cheers.
And we're out. Thank you, Mike. This was a blast. Thank you.
All right. For me as well.
I appreciate that. All right. That's very kind. Have a good night.
You too, sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye.